So we've talked about ratios, we've talked about proportions, we talked about unit rates, and let's move on to this thing called percents. And percents are kind of like unit rates, but instead of talking about how much of a unit we have compared to one of another thing, we're going to talk about how much it would be if it was out of 100. So let's talk about this. Percents and fractions. Fractions and percents go hand in hand. Okay. The word percent actually means per hundred. So if you break this down, okay, it's per means for each, right? Remember we did use that idea of per for unit rates, something like miles per hour, something like that. But this is percent. So this is your the unit here. Okay. So it's for each hundred. Okay, per hundred. So for each hundred, you can think of cent as in pennies. Okay, so this is where I like a lot of times from decimals to percents. I like to think of the decimals as being dollars and percent being pennies, and this is where I get it from cents. You'll see this word cent also with century. Thinking of like there are 100 years in a century. You could think centimeters, right? There's 100 centimeters in 1 meter, and so on. All right, so percent is a ratio, right, where the denominator is going to be 100. So unit rates is where it was 1, and now percent is going to be 100. And I'm sure you've seen it. We've used percent a bunch of times. You use it to find your grades, so hopefully this isn't going to be too difficult, or too new at least. Okay, so here's a block. There's 100 in here, okay? And so let's say if we've shaded in 16, right? 16 out of 100, this would mean there's 16% of the blocks are shaded. Okay, again, 16% means 16 out of 100, okay? 16 out of 100 are shaded. Okay, so we might write this as 16 over 100 or 16%, okay? Again, this little 0/0 sign is the same as this division bar, fraction bar in 100. And when you do talk about an algebra, p just means whatever number. So we're just talking about some percent, right? Some percent. We don't know what it is. We'll call it p. So you can either write it as p over 100 or p percent. All right. Well, let's try some out. Okay. Let's see. If you have 30%, you go ahead and let's see. Think about what this would look like as an actual fraction. Well, we're going to take 37%, and instead of writing that percent sign, we're going to go ahead and put it over 100. So there it is, 37 out of 100. All right, 50%, you should know what this one is. We use this one a lot, 50%. If you take 50% and you put it over 100, you end up with 50 over 100. Now, when possible, you'd like to simplify this. So if you have 50 out of 100, that would be the same as having 1/2, right? So let's say you have 50 cents out of 100. It's basically like saying you have 1 for every 2. Okay, so let's say if you get there, I don't know, 100 pennies on the table and you get to keep 50 of them, basically means for every 2 of them that are there, you get to keep 1. All right, so when we write percents as fractions, we're going to take the percent and we're going to create a ratio with 100. Okay, we're just going to take the number and create a ratio with 100. And you're going to try to simplify when possible. You're also not technically allowed to leave a decimal in a fraction. So let's say you have a decimal percent, which a lot of you guys will see decimal percents when you look at your grades online. You're not allowed technically to leave the decimal in there. That's called a complex fraction. And when you simplify, you get rid of those. But we'll talk about that a little bit more later. So let's try it out. 29%, you go for it. Go ahead and write this as a fraction. Hopefully you got 20 out of 100. Let's try another one. 45%. Well, hopefully you got 45 out of 100. Now, if you look at this, okay, I'm going to notice this ends in 5 here, and this ends in 0, which means I can divide this by 5 and this by 5, and I'm going to end up with 9/20. Okay, and now I look at this, 9, the only thing that goes into 9 is 3. 20 can't be divided by 3, so therefore this 9/20 is simplified. All right, let's try another one. 50%. We just did this one, so this should be relatively easy, right? 50 over 100. Divide right? You could divide both by 50. And so you don't see that right away. You can knock off the zeros, right? You can say, divide this by 10, divide this by 10, you get 5/10. And then you can say, oh yeah, I can divide that by 5. Very good. All right, 25% is going to be 25 over 100. Simplify that. You can divide the top and the bottom by 25, and you get 1/4. Okay. Okay. These are some very, very common percents that you see here. We use these all the time. Okay. You'll especially see percents like these when you talk about discounts or sales. Okay, especially around the holidays, lots and lots of sales, and after the holidays, tons of sales. People want to sell all kinds of stuff that they didn't have a chance to sell during the holidays, during the big busy shopping season, and so they try to get rid of it and put a discount. So that's one way you see it. You'll see taxes, interest rates, all kinds of stuff. It just goes on and on and on. So what I want you to do here is, then this is going to be part of your assignment. I'm going to give you a grade on this. You're going to bring this back to me tomorrow, and you're going to show me this chart. And so what I want you to do is I want you to fill out this chart, simplify, make sure you simplify, and bring it to class tomorrow. So go ahead and pause the video right now, and you go ahead and try filling this out. Okay, go. All right, hopefully you had a chance to do that. Let's go ahead and let's fill this out. Okay, so 10%, that's going to be 10 over 100, which when you simplify it, right, these cancel out. I'm going to end up with 1/10. Okay. Well, 20% is going to be 20 out of 100, which if I simplify this, I end up with actually 1/5. Now think about this. Here's 10%, right? 20% is 2 of those, right? 20% is 10% and another 10%, which means this would be 2/10, which is equal to 1/5. Okay, 25% is going to be 25 over 100, which is equal to 1/4. We just did that one. Okay, now this one, 30 over 100. All right, well now again, 10%, 30%, that's 3 of these, so that would be 3/10. 40%. Okay, now we've got 40 over 100. Now we could say that's 4 of these. We could also say it's 2 of these, right? So that's going to equal to 2/5. You could divide, you could knock the zeros off there and then divide by 2. You could have divided by 20. There's no necessity. As long as you got 2/5, it doesn't really matter. This one's going to equal 1/2. We already did that one. Okay. Now, 60% is 60 over 100. Okay. Now that's 2 of these, right? You could say it's 6 10%. So we could say, okay, that's going to be 6/10. You can divide by 2 here, so that's going to be 3/5. Okay, 70% is going to be 70 over 100. Okay, and once you get good at this, you'll start recognizing. You'll say, oh, 70%. That's 7/10, right? Because 1/10 or 10% is 1/10, so 70% is 7/10. Again, it's kind of like units again, right? Like 10%. If 10% is 1/10, then 70% would be 7/10. Okay. Now 75%, that's 3 of these, right? You could think of money, right? It's 75 cents, which is the same as 3/4. And 80%, a couple different ways. We could say, all right, that's 80 over 100, which is going to be 8/10, which is going to be 4/5. Okay. And what we could have done is we could have said, all right, well, 80% is 4 of these, right? Or we could have said it's 2 of these, so 2/5 is 4/5. Okay, and this one you should have gotten 90 over 100, so this should be 9/10. And last but not least, 100%, that's 100 over 100, which is equal to 1. Okay, make sure you have this. You want to go over it. We're gonna have a quiz on something like this later in the later in the week. What I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start giving you, I'm going to give you a bunch of percents, a bunch of fractions, and you're just going to have to go back and forth quickly in order to know what the fraction to percent conversions are. It'll be fine. It's not that bad. All right, let's move on. Moving on. Let's try moving on again. All right, let's write this percent as a fraction, or the fraction as a percent. 24%, right? That's going to be 6/25. Oops, I probably went a little too fast there. Oops. Okay, so 24% is going to be equal to, let me go back for a second. Let me clear this out. Okay, so 24%, that's going to be equal to 24 over 100, right? Now, if you get kind of stuck here and you're like, I don't know, look at it. They're even, right? So let's divide. We're going to divide by 2. 24 divided by 2 is 12. 100 divided by 2 is 50. Okay, they're still both even. Let's divide by 2 again. We're going to get 6 over 25. Okay? And there's our answer. And that's really just how you do these. You just want to keep dividing by a number that that works for you. Let's see, is this thing going to work? There we go. So 6/25. All right, so you try 55%. Go ahead, try that one. All right, so hopefully you got 55 over 100. And then you simplify by dividing by 5, and you got 11 over 20. All right, try another one, 7/10. Try to write that as a fraction, a percent. Okay. Well, let's see. So we know that a percent means out of 100, right? So can I make this into 100? Well, how do I go from 10 to 100? Multiply by 10. So how do I go from 7 to, what am I going to do here? Multiply by 10. So I get 70 over 100. Well, 70 over 100 is 70%. Okay, 1/50th. Let's try that one. All right, well, hopefully you said, okay, well, percent means out of 100. So from 50 to 100 is multiplied by 2, right? So multiply this by 2. So then I need to multiply the top by 2, and I get 2 out of 100, which is equal to 2%. Okay, not to be mistaken with 20%. Okay, it's 2 out of 100. That's a lot different than 20 out of 100. All right. No. Sorry, I'm playing around with this. No. All right, there we go. 2%. Huh. How do I get this to? Oh, there we go. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. No. Sorry. Having technical difficulties. Here, this is why. I don't think it likes. There we go. Okay, now let's find 70% of 900. Okay, 70% of 900. So let's see let's think about what this means. We got 70%, which means we're going to take 70. All right, 70 out of 100. So 70% is 70 out of 100. Okay, but what they're saying is, what happens if you have 900? So we're going to say, okay, well, what happens if this is out of 900? Well, let's see. You go from 100 to 900, right? This is multiplying by 9. So let's take the top and multiply by 9. All right, well, 7 times 9 is 63. And then we're going to add the 0. So we get 70 out of 70%. Okay. If it's out of 900, that's equal to 630. Okay, so this would be 630. All right, 70%, Okay, this is a fraction, 7/10, right? We know that already, or 70/100ths. Okay, not 900. So if you get 70 out of 100, all right? So think about this. So let's say you're shooting free throws. If you shoot 100 free throws, you normally make 70 of them. So if you shoot 900 free throws, how many should you make? Well, you should make 630. Okay. Or let's say you normally get 70% on a test. If it was worth 900 points, well, how many points would you get on that? Well, you'd get 630. Okay. And let's try another one here. Find 25% of 200. So you try this one. Go ahead and pause the video. Try this one. Okay, so let's see. If you have 20, that's not what I wanted to do. I just wanted to click on that pen. All right, here we go. So let's say if you have 25% means you get 25 out of 100. Well, what if it's out of 200? Well, from 100 to 200, you multiply by 2, right? If out of 100 I get 25, then out of 200 I'm going to get 50. So my answer would be 50. All right. And last but not least, let's try a word problem. Okay. During an election, 112 out of 200 students in 7th grade voted for Lupe for class president. What percent of students did not vote for Lupe? Okay, first, let's do this. Let's figure out how many people voted for Lupe. So, let's grab the pen. All right, so we know that 112 out of 200 voted for Lupe. Okay, how many did not vote for Lupe? Okay, well, 112 minus 200, right? Let's say if this 112 out of 200 voted for Lupe, then we know that 88 did not vote for Lupe. And what I can do is say 200 minus 112. Okay, let's see. I need to borrow from here, make this a 10. I need to borrow from there, make that a 9, and then this becomes 10. So 10 minus 2 is 8. 9 minus 1 is 8. Okay. And the way I did it, I just said, well, what do I need to add here to get there? That's how normally I do it. Okay, so we know that 88 out of 200, okay? Well, we're going to know, well, what percent is that? So what you got to do is you could say, okay, well, what percent is that? Well, from 200 to 100, you divide by 2. So we'll divide 88 by 2, and you get 44. So 44% did not vote for Lupe. Now, there's another way we could have done this. We could have initially said, okay, how many voted for Lupe? Well, if 200 voted, well, how many would have voted if there was 100? Well, we take 112 and divide that by 2, and you're going to end up with 56. So 56%, right, voted for Lupe. And then you could say, well, what number didn't? Okay, because the whole thing has got to add up to 100%. Okay, so 56, well, 100 minus 56 is 44. Okay, so this is how many voted for Lupe, and this is how many voted not for Lupe. Okay, come tomorrow. Make sure you bring that chart with you, filled out, and we will go from there and have some. I've got some activities for you to do. All right.